We got a lot to dive into. Keith Smith, his weekly conversation here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Keith, we got two series in the East that are very interesting. What's going on, my man?
Hey, yeah, definitely. It's we weren't sure after game one how interesting they were going to be, but you can't overreact to that. And now we got two good ones going on.
Yeah, let me ask you about Philly's Game 2 win and what you learned about them from that win. That maybe you were like, I got to see them answer this question for me. Did they answer any questions with that win in Game 2?
Yeah, the biggest thing they answer for me is that they can lock in and make life miserable for Toronto when they're defending. And they did that in a big, big way. I thought Brett Brown's adjustment to put Joel Embiid on Pascal Siakam was terrific. And that was with an Embiid that, quite frankly, didn't look very good. He looked sick, and I know he was, and he looked like it out there. But he still played really well defensively. Ben Simmons on Kawhi Leonard is a move that works. It's something they have to be really careful of because you can't have either one of those guys get in foul trouble. But they didn't in Game 2, and they played great. And that was a big question because I wasn't sure that they were going to be able to do enough defensively to slow down Toronto, and they turned that around in a big way.
For them to be able to go on the road and win a game with Joel Embiid giving them very little in terms of offense, does that change your overall outlook for them?
Yeah, a little bit, because they were so reliant on him having these big monster games offensively, and I think that's because they hadn't quite turned up the defensive intensity at any point late in the season, and then in the first round they didn't always look great on defense either. But when they can lock in, that lessens the need for Embiid to have to go out and score 30 to 40 points for them to win, and that can make a big difference because they're going to get to 90 or so, 95 points without much trouble. It's if they're having to score 100 plus, 110, that's when you really need Embiid to have a big game. And you can't rely on getting that every single game, especially where, they know he was sick, but he's also just not healthy. You can pretty clearly see that. So it was big for them to be able to get that win without him putting together a monster offensive night.
I want to get Keith Smith with us from Yahoo, covers the NBA. Your thoughts on what we're seeing from Ben Simmons defensively? What kind of defensive player? Is he becoming that kind of guy that, hey, if you have Ben Simmons defending, you can take out that other team's guy? Is he there yet? What are you seeing from him defensively?
I think it depends on who the other team's guy is. If it's a small, quick point guard like, say, Kyrie Irving, probably not. That's just too much to ask for a guy who's 6'10". To do that for an entirety of a game, 40 to 45 minutes out on the floor. But if it's a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who he's similarly sized at, yeah, absolutely, he could do that. We've seen him do it at times, and when he did it for an entire game the other night, that was really big, and that's important for Philly because you don't want to ask Jimmy Butler to carry the load defensively, lock down the other team's best wing scorer, and then say, hey, and then at the end of the game, we need you to make a bunch of plays and score some points, because that's a big ask of a guy in the playoffs.
What about the move to switch Tobias Harris to Gasol and Embiid to Siakam? Can they continue to do that, or do you anticipate that Nick Nurse and the Raptors make an adjustment?
Yeah, I think what the Raptors' adjustment will be is to get Gasol in the post more, and they're one of the few teams that will play through him in the post. There's not a lot of teams that will go to straight post-up plays, but Toronto is one of them. I think you'll see that. If they're going to live with Harris there, then you've got to do that. You can't let Gasol be a perimeter guy. When he's guarded by Embiid, that's what you want because you want to have Embiid pulled away from the rim. But if he's guarding Tobias Harris, or guarded by Tobias Harris, rather, you want to have Gasol down inside making things happen. And then I think you'll see them spread and space the floor a little bit more for Siakam so that he can get some, a head of steam off the dribble to attack Embiid that way. I think it just really caught them off guard. And I think here's where you're seeing this is Nick Nurse's first playoffs as the main guy, the guy making the calls. And I think he got caught, with his deer in headlights a little bit of, I wasn't expecting them to do this. And by the time they adjusted to it, it was really just too late.
Keith, also one thing was James Ennis coming off the bench and Greg Monroe coming off the bench. I mean, who would have thought if I told you Monroe and Ennis were going to get you 23 points off the bench, which was more than what Embiid gave you, that the Sixers were in a game. Yeah, if I told you they had 23 points, you probably figured they got blown out and those guys were coming up with garbage minutes. But how important was what Brett Brown did with his rotations and went to Monroe?
Yeah, huge. It was just enormous. Ennis is kind of a guy who we've been hoping for this for a couple of years from him in different stops, and he's just never quite been able to pull it off. I think he's finally feeling comfortable and feeling pretty good about where he is, and that's huge for Philadelphia because they need just somebody who can give them a little bit of bench punch, some scoring there. And then for Greg Monroe to come in and play like this, that's going to be one of the bigger surprises of this entire playoffs because I think everybody across the league had really said, all right, this is just a break glass in case of emergency. If both Embiid and Boban and Bolden are all hurt, all right, then maybe we go to Greg Monroe, but that's only if Amir Johnson's not feeling good. And for him to be the first big off the bench and play as well as he did, especially on the defensive end, that's huge for Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I don't know, and Mike Scott's coming back, and that's another part, that Scott didn't play in either of the first games, and they were able to escape a road win without Scott, who has essentially been their best bench guy since they picked him up. For them not to for them not to have him and find a way to win, he looks like he should be back to Game 3. And what he adds to the bench here, it should be interesting to see how Brett Brown utilizes him now. You know what I mean? Like, how's he going to fit him in, and what's he going to do with Ennis, and what he does with that bench rotation now, adding another guy, because he went short with the bench, and I'll give him credit because I didn't want to say I blasted him, but I said, look, you got to shorten these bench guys up and give these starters more minutes, and he did it the other night.
Yeah, he absolutely did. Now, one of the things that's tough is if you lose a game like that, and then the next thing everybody turns on, he's like, you can't be playing Embiid 45 minutes, and when he's sick and all this stuff. And that's the hard thing for a coach is, you're really never going to win unless you actually pull off the win in the game. But I don't think Ennis's role changes any with Scott coming back because they're different guys. They're backing up different guys. But I think Scott immediately comes right back in. I think Brett Brown is smart enough guy to know, hey, I got this big night from Greg Monroe. We'll certainly try him again in the series, but we're not going to count on getting another performance like that because that's better than Monroe has done for anybody over the last probably at least 2, maybe even 3 seasons. So you're looking at it more of a whatever he gives us as a bonus. But, yeah, I think they're feeling a little bit better than they would have. And when you go up and split on the road as a lower seed, you did your job. It's rare you're going to pull off 2 wins on the road in the first 2. If you get 1, you did exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I know Philly is one of the better home teams in the league. I mean, to me, this Game 3 is almost imperative for the Sixers to win the series. I had Raptors in 6, and they do not have to win in Toronto again, which makes this game, after not winning there since 2012, these 2 games Philly almost has to have to win the series. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think it is really important. When you steal home court, it is really important that then you keep home court stolen, I guess, is the best way to put it. Because if you don't, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You really have got to, make sure that you can get those wins again. And I apologize, the school bus is driving by the house here. But you have to get those wins because otherwise you're going to be really trying to figure things out and how you can get another win on the road. So Game 3 becomes huge. It almost becomes kind of a swing point in the series.
Yeah.
Because if you win it, you really can start to believe, all right, I think we can get this thing.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The Sixers, I think, proved a lot of the doubters and maybe proved to themselves that we can beat this team. And now if they can get the win in Game 3, it almost seems like the confidence level shifts over to Philly and that Toronto starts questioning themselves a little bit. Yeah,
it absolutely does. And that's one of the fun things about the playoffs. It was we saw that in the Boston-Milwaukee series. It was, well, Boston's going to the finals. Look at how much they destroyed the Bucks, and then the Bucks come back and hammer Boston last night, and it's like, oh, well, maybe we overreacted a little. But it's one of those things, and you like to believe that the teams are immune to it, and that's just the fan and media thing, but they're not. They start to question themselves. Doubt can creep in a little bit, and I always like to say, if like in this example, if Philly can get this Game 3 win and go up 2-1, and then let's say they can race out to a nice lead, 10, 12, 15 points, all of a sudden if you're Toronto, and all of that weight on those guys who have been there and been through it a few times starts to come down on them of here we go again. And that starts to be one of those things that it's hard for a team to dig themselves back out from under that self-doubt. Now, they've got enough guys who have been there, done that, in Kawhi Leonard, Danny Green, Marc Gasol, that you think you can pull that off without too much worry. But it is something, you really do start to think about and worry about if you're a fan of the Raptors.
Keith Smith, Yahoo NBA, at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter. Last night we have the Bucks 23s, man. That's their game. And Boston struggled shooting. Kyrie did not have a good night. But what's going on with Tatum? 4 points in Game 1, 5 points in Game 2.
Yeah, completely invisible in these two games. This is, a couple people pointed it out. It's, very short history, but this is the first time he started off a playoff series on the road. And he was pretty good in round one. He played well, but these two games, he just did not look up to task, did not look like he was ready, for what the Bucks' intensity was going to be in the crowd and all that. So Celtics are going to need him to be better at home. History tells us he probably will be, but if he's not, it just becomes that much harder for them because they cannot rely so heavily on just Kyrie and Al Horford to create all their offense.
Yeah, and then obviously in Game 1, Boston pretty much got everything to go and everything went their way. What adjustments did the Bucks make that had them run away with Game 2? Because, the first game, the Bucks looked a little tight, I thought.
Yeah, I think they were a little tight. I think maybe they had a little in their head of, here we go, the Celtics. Everybody said they were going to do this to us, and now they are. But I think the big adjustment that they made defensively is they started switching a lot more, especially off the ball. And that really kind of threw Boston, I think, for a loop. I don't think they were prepared for it. Milwaukee switched less in the regular season than any team other than Orlando. So that is, that's a big ask to ask your guys to do something that they just don't do. And they were able to pull that off. And what it caused was then the Celtics, every time down, they were switching all the stuff off ball. Boston, instead of getting a shot or into the ball into the player's hand that they wanted with a mismatch with, say, 15 seconds on the clock, that was happening with 7 or 8. And that's what was causing a lot of those forced rush shots at the end of the clock. And then when the Celtics got frustrated, they started launching early in the clock, which really took them out of their offense entirely.
Yeah, and, we saw Kyrie just didn't have a good shooting night. So is it that the Bucks figured something out? I mean, they are the better seed, the number 1 seed. They had the 60 wins. Did they figure something out, or was it just not a good shooting night for Boston? We seem like there always seems to be this dynamic of, hey, did they make the perfect adjustment, or did Boston just not shoot the ball well?
Yeah, they did make some adjustments, but in the case of Kyrie, for example, he just shot poorly, and that's you're not going to get another game like that from him in the series where, I don't know what his final line was, I can't remember, but it was bad.
Like 4 of 18, I think it was.
4 of 18, I knew it was something 4, 17, 18, 19 in that range. You're not going to see that again out of him. He missed a ton of shots that he never misses. Those open, little floaters and then the mid-range turnarounds, those are things he usually gets to go and knocks down. So if you're Milwaukee, you're thinking, all right, well, we did it, but was it so much of what we did? For some of the other guys, absolutely, it caused them to have some problems, especially a couple guys off the bench. But for Kyrie specifically, I don't think they did too much. I just think he had a really rough game, and I would be very surprised if it's that bad again in the series.
Well, and then, of course, 7 threes out of Middleton, too. I mean, you're going to get 7 threes out of Middleton plus Antetokounmpo. That's going to be a tough team to beat when they shot horribly in Game 1.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've been kind of saying about both of these teams since last night is Boston is not as good as they looked in Game 1 or as bad as they looked in Game 2. Milwaukee is not as bad as they looked in Game 1 or as good as they looked in Game 2.
Right.
Both teams did their thing. I think now you're going to see these teams play good, close games. I would not be surprised if this goes 7 games, much like Philadelphia. Boston did what they set out to do. They got 1 of 2 in Milwaukee. That makes these next 2 home games really, really important. They're going to pull off this upset, and that's something that they need to really take advantage of, because otherwise you're right back where you started if you drop one of these 2.
Yep, we got the adjustments there. We had hot shooting. By the way, Mirotic getting put into the starting lineup was a big factor, too. Let's not forget that. Game 3 on Friday right here on 97.3 ESPN. Ball is in Brad Stevens' court. Then we go out west, where last night you had Curry leave the game with injury. Harden poked in the eyes. He comes back, said afterwards he couldn't see at all, yet shot the ball pretty well. They actually played pretty well without Harden, and then when he came back in the game, they seemed a little clunky. He seemed like he was playing by himself out there when he came back. I mean, he was just jacking stuff up, but making stuff. But in the end, too much Durant yet again. And last year we got this great 7-game series. Do we anticipate that Houston can protect its home floor, or does this have the makings of a Warriors, what we thought last year? A lot of people thought Warriors in 5 last year and went 7. Is this the year we get the short Warrior-Rocket series?
Yeah, I'm starting to think it could be, and I thought this was going to be a 7-game series coming in, but the Warriors have just taken it to another level defensively. They every once in a while, I think they like to collectively remind us, when we lock in, this is who we are and this is what we do, and that's really, really better than any other team in the league can do. And I think what you saw with them, and what's going to be interesting here is if Houston is going to make any noise in this series, they're going to come with their best effort of the year in Game 3. And if they do that and don't win, at that point you start to say, well, we can't then. We did everything we could do and we still can't beat these guys. And that's when you start to believe, all right, this thing's over in 4, maybe 5 at the most. But if they come out with a great effort and beat the Warriors and do that, then they're going to start to feel a little bit of confidence, and we may get that long series we thought we would. It's going to be really important to see which Rockets team shows up.
Let me ask you this. If the Rockets lose this series in 5, and Golden State, now I don't think Golden State stays together with Durant and the crew, but if they were to, if you're the Rockets, do you reevaluate how you've built your team?
Geez, that's a tough question. I think how you look at it is, especially if Durant leaves, you're going to look at it and say, hey, it didn't go our way for any number of reasons, Durant being the biggest problem. They just don't have anybody who can do anything with him. Not that anybody really does when he's playing like this, but that's their single biggest issue. So I think you would look at it as more, we need to make some moves around the fringes, because that's really all they're limited to being able to do anyway. And that Warriors team, they're going to come back to the pack a little if they lose Durant. We're still right here. If we make a couple nice moves, pick up a couple good vet guys who can fill some spots, these minutes that are going to guys like Daniel House and Gerald Green, if we can fill those in a little bit better, we probably feel pretty good about our chances. So I think that's the route Daryl Morey will take.
Well, they owe Chris Paul $44 million when he's 36 years old. I would be vomiting every night if I knew that.
Yeah, I think you look at that and say, well, at least it's not John Wall coming off an Achilles there.
Right.
That's about the best you can do with that one.
And I'm not saying that Paul just stinks, but, he's starting to look like he's slowing down just a little bit. And 3 years from now, I can't even imagine where he's going to be. Keith Smith, Yahoo, NBA, Real GM, CelticsBlog.com, at Keith Smith, NBA. How about tonight? We got one game on the docket tonight, and it's a series that no one's talking about, but this one could be very entertaining with two guys that just don't get the pub, the Joker and Lillard.
Yeah, and people should be, giving more attention to this. It was a really fun game 1. It's going to be a fun game 2 in this one. I think, we should have a really good time, watching these two teams. They really play great offensively. They do a lot of the things that we all enjoy on offense, a lot of moving the ball, a lot of, guys, pinging it around the perimeter and things like that. Defensively, if you love defense, you might be questioning it a little bit, but these teams are fun. They're they do have some fun. They do get up and down the court and do some things. So I'm really curious to see how Game 2 plays out. And again, one of those where Portland doesn't. It's not a must win for them, but if they're going to pull off the upset, it would be nice to get one here.
All right, we know that Portland, by the way, who a lot of people Keith, we're afraid that, hey, maybe this team they won round one in impressive fashion over Oklahoma City, that if they could beat Denver, that they could give teams problem. And then Denver's saying, well, what about us? They won game number one after going 7 games. I was a little surprised by that. I thought Portland might steal. You usually can steal that game one, but I got to give a lot of credit to Denver for stepping up and winning that game.
Yeah, I think in this case it actually helped Denver that they went 7 games with the Spurs, because I think they had to really go into that game one knowing, like, hey, we're not so far ahead of everybody else. We need to play, and we need to play good basketball. It wasn't one of these where they'd sat around for a week and just kind of waiting and hearing about how good they were. They had to step up big and to get that game 7 win, and now they're ready for game one. So I think that actually helped them. But Portland's they're a little banged up. I'm worried about them having enough. Cantor played a good game one, but he's got a shoulder issue that he's working through, and we'll see how long that can last, especially as the series goes deeper. They're asking a lot out of him, and that could get pretty tough.
All right, everybody. Keith Smith. Every Wednesday we talk NBA right here on the Sports Bash, and we are into round number 2. We got 1-1 in the East, both series. We got 2-0 Golden State, Houston, and we got 1-0 with Game 2 tonight in Denver and Portland. And we'll recap all of the games coming up next Wednesday with Keith Smith right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. All right, man. Thank you so much, pal.
Thank you. Appreciate it.